Okay, I want to talk about negotiating contracts. Of course, as in our work, that's what we do. Almost everything we do involves a contract of some type. And there's always a lot of questions about how do I do this and all of that. So the first big question, let me see if I can get this moving, is, there it goes. It always acts weird on this. Anyways, the biggest thing people ask is, should I have a lawyer? Maybe. That's all I can say about that. If it makes you more comfortable, if you have the means to have a lawyer, then go ahead and have someone that looks over any contract that's presented to you and perhaps even develops a contract for you in case, there's always that client you get that says, well, we don't have a contract. Do you have one? And so, maybe help you build a contract that you can present if to clients that don't have one. So whether or not to use a lawyer is very much, a choice. If you have the means, why not? In my case, I'm cheap. I hate to spend any more money than I need to. So I have always just felt like, well, I'm just going to do this. I'm just going to go ahead and read the contracts myself. So I've had, of course, as a result of that, I've had some experiences. So if you don't or you can't get a lawyer for some reason, you can do this. It's just a matter of being, of course, the biggest thing I have to do is make sure I read things. Hang on, so here's read every word, even if it comes in, it's like a stack of books. Sit down and read every word. Don't just look and say, well, this looks pretty much like a standard contract, I'll just sign it. Read it. You never know what somebody's going to have put into that contract that someday might come back and, become a problem for you. Some things to pay attention to. Okay, if I'm reading every word, what should I be looking for? First of all, you want to know the scope of work. Is that scope of work what you proposed you're going to do? Or have they added to it? Have they changed the way they describe something in a way that may lead to scope, scope creep or whatever, so that all of a sudden, this 5-hour job that you took on becomes a 20-hour job and you're paid for 5. So look carefully at that. And think about, is this exactly what I signed up for when we talked? Another thing to look, is there an exit clause? So many contracts you'll read and it says, contracting organization, we may end this at any time, with just some notice or something. Well, you know what? You want to be able to end that contract the same way. You do not want to sign a contract that says they can fire you, but you can't fire them. The chances that you'll have to fire someone are very, very slim, but in my 10 years, we fired a client a couple of years ago. And thank goodness we went back to our contract and it said that we could do that. Because if something's really going wrong, if this is turning out to be not what you signed up for, or you might, in this case, people were becoming nasty because we wouldn't rewrite a report to say what they wanted to say. And it was our baseline assessment, and we wrote things that they didn't want to hear and they wanted it taken out. And we're like, no, that's a critical piece of this. So we just resigned. It's like, no, we're not going to do this way. And of course, it was getting nasty. They were being coercive. So make sure you have an exit clause in case you need it. Have them. And it's okay, like if you read that contract and there's things in it you don't like, it is okay to go back to your client and say, I'm sorry, but I'll sign this after this is done. Don't go in there with thinking, well, I better just sign what they sent because they might get mad. This is business. This is not you making friends with these folks. Even though, like, I always feel like this sort of connection with my clients and all this, underneath it, this is business too. Keep that in mind. And if it makes them mad because you need something changed in a contract, that doesn't bode well. Look at the insurance and look for other requirements. Years ago, I was taking on a contract with a client, and I'd worked with them a lot in the past. They had been my client a lot when I was in grad school and everything else. But they had changed their contracts up quite a bit. So I get this very small contract and it says, you need to go through our vendor credentialing and get background checks and all this. You will need to have all these insurances, including workers' comp. Well, I don't have any employees, so that's a biggie. Almost everybody will have workers' comp requirements in the contract. You want them to take that out if you don't have any employees, because you don't need to pay. You don't need to, you can't. I mean, you don't have anybody to cover. But you also don't want that, even though it's like, well, that won't matter. So no, have it taken out. Make sure that anything in that requirement or in that contract makes sense. But the other thing is because they were a medical center, they wanted drug testing and all of these other things. And I went in and I added up how much all those requirements were going to cost. And I was going to make about $200 on that job after I paid for everything it would take to be able to do that contract. So I sent it back and I said, look, number one, the drug testing has to go. There is no purpose whatsoever. I will, I understand you're a medical center and people who work around those areas really do need drug testing, but nothing I do is going to have anything to do with drugs. Besides, I don't do drugs, and they don't know that, though. They can't take my word for that. But the point was, I was going to have to do it at my expense. I said, take out this insurance, take this out. They took everything out except the background check, which I agree. And I do every year still. It's very important because I will have access to clients and children. And yeah, if someone wants me to go through this credentialing service that gives me a background check, I have to pay for it every year. It's a few $100s that, it's a business expense. But at the same point, that is a reasonable requirement. You cannot have programs where you're going to be around babies and children and not have had a background check. So, okay. And it is a major medical center, but they took everything else out and I've been contracted with them for 10 years. So, like I say, don't be afraid to tell them, no, you need to take this out. This is not going to work, especially if it's going to end up that you're going to end up making $200 after you pay for everything. Look at the payment terms and the payment schedule. If you gave them a proposal that said, we're going to do this on a deliverable based, not hourly basis, make sure they're not going to change that up, that the contract doesn't say you'll submit invoices with your hours, and make sure that those payment terms and the payment schedule are going to work for you. If you need the money throughout, like if this is a 2-year contract, you don't want to have to wait till 2 years to get paid. In the end, you want it set up so that there are payments, across that 2-year period. So pay attention to that as well. That's always a biggie when I look at contracts. Another one is subcontractors. If you're planning to use subcontractors and their contract might say no subcontractors, then you're going to have a problem. The other thing that I forgot to put in my slides this morning, but now I remembered and I had written down that I was going to mention, is change orders. If you are under a contract and all of a sudden they're asking you to do extra work, it is not in that contract, then you need to do a change order. They can do an addendum to it. They can just add, they don't have to redo the entire contract. It can be simply an addendum that's done. Other things that you may come across is I have one client where they do a contract each year with me, and then they do work orders for each thing that needs to be done. So whenever they have something new come in, they just send me a work order that is sort of like a contract addendum. So watch for instances like that too. If it's going to be a client where you may be doing multiple things as things come up, they can do it that way as well. And that's been interesting because I'll be, all of a sudden I'll get an email, hey, we're doing this. And are you going to have, will you be able to do the evaluation? Sure. They send me a work order and I do that. But I've been working with them probably 3-4 years now. And every year it's just, so contracting comes in a lot of different formats, but you always, always, always do not want to do extra work or more work on any contract or different work. If they decide that, well, we had signed up, like in one case, we signed up for a survey. Well, then we found out that a survey wasn't going to work. It was going to need to be something different. Have that change order run through anyways, because you don't want to do a whole key informant interview project that was going to be a survey. And then when you turn in the report, they go, hey, our contract says you're going to do a survey. I mean, you want to trust people and you want to think, oh yeah, they're going to, you know, this is fine. We'll do this. No, make sure things are in writing again. This is your business. And even though, you know, I have no problem. I don't know. Some people feel uncomfortable having to talk about these things with their clients because we're in that sort of human services, we're all colleagues and partners thing. But remember, you're a business and it's really important to always. And when somebody's, you know, when you're working with a client and they start asking you to do a bunch of extra stuff, you want to be nice. You want to be, oh, but they don't have a lot of money. They need this, they need this. I've seen a lot of consultants, all of a sudden, this is out of control. So again, those change orders, get comfortable, get yourself to a point where you're comfortable telling people, I am really enjoying working with you. It's a great engagement. I love what we're doing, but this extra work you're asking me to do is pretty substantive and it's going to take this many hours. And I can't do that without added compensation. We're going to need, can we do a change order on my contract to make sure? So always, always don't let them go beyond what you're contracted for without adding more contract, adding more money, and keeping that mindset. You know, you can always remind them, this is how you're making your living. You know, this is not, you are not sitting here volunteering and stuff. They hired you. You have a skill. They want that skill. They need to pay for it. And that is really, I thought, all I have. I'd be more interested maybe in answering questions from here. I know it wasn't a very long presentation, but that's about all there is to say about this, Matt.